Bienvenue à tous, merci de votre participation. Pour écouter notre session en français, veuillez cliquer en bas de votre écran sur l'onglet Interprétation et sélectionner le drapeau français. Merci.
On behalf of ICLEI Africa, the African Center for Cities, Our Future Cities, Surge Africa, and the Red Cross Crescent Climate Center, we are delighted to welcome you to the Rise Africa 2024 Action Festival. Rise Africa is a platform that brings together thinkers, doers, and enablers to inspire action for sustainable cities. This is our 4th edition of our Rise Africa Action Festival, which brings together insights, practices, and visions from across the continent under this year's theme of Solutions Only, Failures Also. This year's theme provokes us to change the way we view our cities and approach their development, particularly to promote a solutions orientation to our worldview. The festival invites you to embrace different ways of knowing, to seek ways to bridge science, policy, business, and arts in creative ways. It invites you to forge new partnerships, experiment with new concepts and ideas, and drive change in your homes and communities. This year's festival, we are running a social media storm to share how urbanization is happening in Africa, that cities can be centers of possibility, and how we can inspire action for sustainable African cities. Please share these for the days of the festival, including Africa Day, the 25th of May. As is tradition, we invite you to enter this session in a spirit of creativity.
Niaje. My name is Ngatia. This is Timothy Erinaitwe. We are from Nairobi, Kenya. The poem we're about to do is called Ululeshu. A toast to everyone refueling our reservoirs of joy, choosing to see continuity where endings were declared. Those locking arms in the face of destitution, embracing hope with easy smiles, saying we will see this through and together. Glasses in the air for the weavers amongst us, threading care into tattered social fabric, from locality to neighborhood to area, all bound together by this magic of community, those rubbing the idea of family like balm into unfamiliar bonds. A dedication to all the dreamers, adding color to the mosaic of our present, birthing new patterns into the spaces where old techniques ran out of steam. Those rebuilding, rethinking, reloving, reusing, redesigning, rebecoming, and sketching out fresh layers onto cities that were handed to us. May our trail inspire passion in those that follow our footsteps. Asante sana.
Welcome, everyone. It's so lovely to have you all here with us today. Welcome to our session with my wonderful colleagues that have just switched on their videos. Our session is called Education for Wholeness, Exploring the Transformative Potential of Whole Person Education. We've got some amazing speakers in the room with us, and yeah, looking forward to engaging with the audience as well. You're very welcome to post into the chat if you like, where you're joining us from, for us to get a sense of who is in the room with us and where you're based. So very warm welcome again. And just a quick mention, if you are here and want the French translation, there is an interpretation button at the bottom. It's the globe icon. So you can join that channel and listen to all of this in French. So with that, let me introduce myself briefly. My name is Vanessa van der Heide. I am the co-director at the Sustainability Institute, which is an NGO based just outside of Stellenbosch. And we have the privilege of partnering with Stellenbosch University. And two of my colleagues in the room today are from Stellenbosch University, Ruenda Lutz and Sean Dunn, and two of the alumni of the program that we're going to be talking about. With that, I'd love for the panel to introduce themselves. I know that we have one panel member who's experiencing tech issues, unfortunately. So we're going to wait. Hopefully she can still join us. But in the meantime, I'd like to ask the three other panelists to just please introduce yourself, your name, how you fit into this program that we're going to be discussing, and where your home is. Maybe we can start with you, Ruenda.
Thanks, Vanessa. Hi, my name is Ruenda. I am the program leader and I also teach on the Diploma in Sustainable Development, which we'll be talking about today. And I am based at the School of Public Leadership at Stellenbosch University. Home is wherever my husband, my daughter, my dogs are, and that is currently Kuils River, Cape Town.
Thank you, Ruenda. Sean.
Good afternoon, Sanbonani, everybody. My name is Sean Dunn. I work as a lecturer in the diploma program. Ruenda is my colleague, and we house in the School of Public Leadership. I am based in Somerset West, which is one home, but my heart resides in Durban, KwaZulu-Natal. That's where I originate from. Thanks.
Thank you, Sean. Antoinette.
Thank you, Vanessa. Hello, everyone. My name is Antoinette Mralasi. I am a graduate student from Stellenbosch University with a diploma in sustainable development. I am currently studying the advanced diploma in sustainable development, and I currently work for Stellenbosch University's Water Institute. I am originally from the Free State and I reside in Stellenbosch today. Thank you.
Thank you, Antoinette. And then I'll just give a quick shout out to James, who's also in the room with us. James is very kindly going to be monitoring our chat for us. So we're not going to be paying too much attention to the chat as we are talking. But he will be taking notes of any questions. So if you do have questions that pop up as we're talking, please feel free to pop them into the chat, and we'll have some time at the end to have hopefully some great discussions and questions and input from the audience. We love that. So yeah, please feel free to engage as much as you can. Great. So we thought it would be wonderful to start with some rapid fire questions for our panelists, because they are people too. They might be sitting up here as experts in a particular topic, but they are just people like you and I. So we're going to have some fun questions for each of them. I'm going to start with Ruenda. Ruenda, if you could have any superpower, what would it be?
Ooh, I would like to be able to sleep with my eyes open whilst doing stuff. Otherwise, I'd like to be able to clone myself. Just because I don't get around to everything I want to do and I'm exceptionally tired all the time.
Sounds like someone who's struggling with burnout a little bit. Thank you. Antoinette, if you could visit any place in the world right now, where would you go?
Oh, right now, I wish I could go to Lesotho. It's where I grew up when I was little, and the place is very much tied to my grandmother and memories I have of her. And it's also a very lovely place if you want to relax and move a little bit away from technology. So I would very much like to go to Lesotho for a little while.
Amazing. I haven't been there. I'd love to go. I've heard it's absolutely beautiful. Sean, if you could have dinner with any historical figure, who would it be?
Sure. I would think either, Che Guevara or Thomas Sankara, one of the two. And I think just because to understand how do they have the sense of awakening and to do what they do and have made an impact on the world. Yeah.
Awesome.
Sure.
And just for the fun of it, one more question for each of you. Ruenda, what conspiracy theory do you believe in?
Lip ice has something in it that dries your lips out. And so when you use lip ice, you have to use more and more of it, which is why I don't use lip ice.
Love it. I feel like we all have one little conspiracy theory that we believe in. Antoinette, are you early bird or night owl?
Honestly, Vanessa, it depends on the season. I'm definitely a night owl during the winter and an early bird in the summer. So both.
Nice, a little bit of hibernation in the winter.
Yes.
And Sean, what's the most adventurous thing you have ever done?
I've leapt off. I did what do you call that swing at Oribi Gorge. It's like I don't know, I can't get the name, but you're kind of on a rope and you like leap off. And when I got onto it, I kind of really resisted. I only did it because there was a younger lady who was like a mentee, and I wanted to encourage her. So I was very courageous to accompany her. But when I had the harness on and then I felt that rope pulling me, I really started bridge jumping. Thank you. I wouldn't do it again, but I did it. It was, I have a bit of backlash trauma as I think about it now.
I'm amazed. Very impressive. And I see that our fourth panelist, I'm so glad you were able to join us. Jay, I don't know if you've sorted out your tech issues. I saw you came into the room. Are you able to switch on your video? Are you there? Okay, seems like she might still be struggling. If she does join us, I will just pull her into the conversation. Jay is also an alumni of the diploma program that we're chatting about today, and she's got some awesome input. So if she does join, you'll know she's who she is. And yeah, we'll just pull her in as we go. Well, thank you. Very entertaining. Of what this program is that I keep referring to, just for our audience members to get to know a little bit more about this diploma, which takes place at Stellenbosch University in collaboration with the Sustainability Institute. Ruenda, could you tell us a little bit more about what this diploma is and what makes this diploma different to other mainstream programs?
Sure. So the diploma is a 3-year undergraduate program, and I think it's different in terms of what we teach and also how we teach. So what we teach is different in that it's a multidisciplinary program, which is quite rare at an undergraduate level. We have a little bit of social science, some political aspects, a little bit of natural science and some business all mixed together through the lens of what it means to be sustainable and beyond sustainable, to go into regenerative spaces. And then I think maybe what we'll spend the most time talking about today is how we teach and why that's different and the success we've seen with this approach. It's very experiential and we focus on immersive learning. We are very fortunate to have the opportunity to use the space at the Lyndoch Eco Village as a living laboratory for our program. But we also think differently about the relationship between facilitator and student. We like getting our hands dirty and really focusing on igniting joy and curiosity for our students.
Great, thank you. Thanks for that little bit of background. I'd love to hear from Antoinette how you would explain the diploma to the audience from a student perspective.
Thank you for the question, Vanessa. From a student's perspective, I would say that the diploma program offers students an opportunity to learn skills and gain knowledge in an interactive and collaborative way so that we may operate well in such a complex socioeconomic world such as the one we live in, with a keen eye on sustainability in different contexts. There's also a big push for holistic learning, and I found that this is very prevalent in the diploma program.
Wonderful. And also one more question for you in the absence of Jay. Could you also share a little bit what impact the diploma has had on you?
Sure, of course. I have recently gained an inquiring mind and sought to understand the meaning behind everything I do. And the diploma program really pushes me to think, okay, how do I make sure that I have an impact in my learning and as I develop in the skills that I gain? Before the diploma program, I was not a very engaged citizen. I was more focused on myself and different ways that I can make money and basically escape poverty alone. But now I care about the social impact and capacity building for the betterment of Africa. I've also become much more of a dynamic professional who cares about adapting in different circumstances. And I've also improved many social skills and public speaking abilities. And I'm more determined to make meaningful impact. Overall, I think that the diploma program has made me a well-rounded individual who is more supportive to South Africans and to Africa at large.
Wonderful. It sounds like quite an awakening as for your calling as a change maker, which is wonderful to hear. So a lot of what we're going to be talking about today is about education and what kind of education we think as a group of panelists and myself as a facilitator of the conversation today that we think we need more of in the world. And I'd love for Sean to maybe speak to that a bit more. What is the kind of education that you think South Africa in particular is calling for?
Sure, Vanessa, thanks. I also must apologize. My throat seems to be acting up. So I think for all of us who've come through the South African schooling system, we have a story to tell. And having grown up in a township in South Africa, I found that when I reflect, I feel that education has to be relevant and contextual. We need to bring in African voices into educational spaces. We need more of traditional knowledge systems that address local, cultural, social, and economic needs. And then what I've experienced within the diploma as well is this holistic development that promotes the development of the whole person, and it includes the emotional, the social, the spiritual components. Often within the schooling sector, for example, the physical is catered for. So you do well with your body, you go into sport, you excel. But we often find that the element of the spiritual is neglected, and part of the African knowledge system is embedded within that aspect of the spiritual. It also includes integrating life skills, eco-literacy, and citizenship education. You hear Internet mentioning how she kind of developed that, having been in the diploma. And then, which kind of was always focused on when talking about education, is skills-oriented education. There is a focus on the practical and vocational skills that prepare students for the working world, to become the best versions of themselves. We're not just wanting to churn out. Education shouldn't just churn out students to go into the world and fill a gap, but it's about thriving. And this will also include entrepreneurial skills to drive our economy, and needing to be underpinned by a strong ethical foundation. We can see what's going on in South Africa and globally, i.e. corruption. And so government is doing this in a way in terms of the focus on STEM, which is science, technology, engineering, and mathematics education. But there needs to be also an incorporation of the social sciences, the arts, in order to build a robust society and encourage innovation. And I think that somewhere along the way will allow an individual, allow a child to thrive. And that's what education, I think, should be, as allowing each boy and girl, young man, young woman to thrive.
Beautiful. Thank you, Sean. I think this idea of challenging this factory model of education is a lot of, I know what you've also been inspired by, and people like Paulo Freire and others that have worked in this space of education and really challenging our conventional systems of education. So we have a video that we would like to play for you, which I think will give you a little bit of a more visual sense of what it is that this program does and where it is based, just outside of Stellenbosch in South Africa. So Tashi, if I could ask you to play that video for us now, please. Thank you.
The fractured nature of our world is mirrored in the fractured nature of higher education. In higher education, we often focus on head knowledge and theory, and we ignore different ways of knowing. If we want to address the complex challenges in the world, we need whole humans who work in integrated ways. Wholeness can bring us to solutions.
One of the ways we practice wholeness in this program is by bringing our whole selves as a gift to nature. We come not to extract, but to knock on nature's door and ask her to teach us again. We allow time and space for our students to seek out the wild places, outside and inside themselves.
In this program, I have learned about the inability for nature to be malignant. Humans are malignant, and we have been towards nature for the past few centuries. Nature has a gift and the ability to heal. When I reflect in nature, I am able to absorb its healing abilities through the practice of mystica in solitude. Nature also has the ability to fill my lungs with air. My problems become smaller. I am at peace. I am less troubled.
This program experiments with learning that is of body, mind, and soul. We encourage students to slow down, become mindful, and intentionally reflect on different ways of being, with ourselves, with others, and with nature. We acknowledge our sensory world, our cellular memories, and connections.
We draw from the wisdom of indigenous communities that acknowledge the value of all forms of life, human and non-human, those living and those who have transcended but are always present.
The learning experience is designed to connect abstract theory with the physical place of Lyndoch in this community, a place where we learn to weave together what is living and rising from this land with intellectual curiosity. Students are not passive recipients of knowledge. They are active co-creators of their learning. We honor our African heritages with all their complexities, so that our students can question what different, more just African futures might look like.
The wholeness we find comes from indigenous wisdom that acknowledges the unity between the human and non-human, the child and the elder, the plants and the insects, the teacher and the students. For transformation to happen in our world, we need transformation in higher education. We must approach learning in holistic ways to allow higher education to draw on indigenous wisdom and become whole again. And so we thank you for taking time to watch our video. And now I would like to ask you to keep your cameras off. And we're going to just give you a taste of what students encounter during some aspects of our module. You've seen the images in the video. That's the Sustainability Institute, and the outdoor space is the space we sometimes have students immersed in. So I'm going to do a very short meditation, and I ask you to sit back, close your eyes, and just be comfortable in the space. And if you can, to imagine yourself in an outdoor space, and if you can't, it's okay. Just to be comfortable and hoping that you can find something that's natural, like a plant around you, and just to make a connection. And so I ask you just to close your eyes and take a breath in, and I'm going to guide you through the breathing exercise. And then eventually you'll continue breathing on your own. And so we'll do this 4 times. And I'll invite you to inhale to the count of 6, pause to the count of 6, and exhale to the count of 6. And as I said, we'll do this 4 times, and then at the end, I'll give you further guidance. So breathe in, 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6. Pause, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6. Exhale, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6. Breathe in. Pause. And breathe out. Slowly. And breathe in while counting. And pause. And breathe out. Gently exhaling. One more time, breathe in. Hold your breath. And exhale. And while your eyes are closed and you continue breathing in the same rhythm, I want you to bring into your mind a time where you experience gratitude from someone, be it a friend, be it a family member, be it a loved one, in terms of relationship, where you felt a sense of awe. You were so grateful. Something that was just unexpected was bestowed upon you or given to you. Just go back to that moment where you felt that sense of gratitude. And when that image comes to mind, wherever you are, just nod your head and smile. And quietly just say thank you. Holding on to that feeling of gratitude. And while experiencing it, again, I'm going to count in and out another breath, and then we will come back into the space. So I invite you to inhale. 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6. And pause, hold your breath. And exhale gently. I invite you to now open your eyes and we come back into the space and we say thank you for bestowing us with your presence this afternoon. And we are thankful. Thank you.
Thank you, Sean. Thank you for helping us slow down. And I want to put my first question to you around that, especially what we also spoke about in the video. So in the video, we refer to slowing down to explore different ways of being in the world. Can you say more about this and why slowing down is one of the most radical acts that we can perform in our dominant culture, which is very driven by productivity and progress?
Oh, sorry. I think slowing down is such an important part of our life. The financial system, the industrial system today is one of productivity and underpinned by capitalism. And I'm not saying we run away from capitalism or making money. But I think for a long time, we have been so caught up that we are becoming burnt out. We are so tired and we are expected to continue going. And if we work in a traditional employment journeys, we expected to exit at 65 and retire. And by then, many people, I know of people who've died a few months or so after retirement because they've put their bodies and their spirits through so much to conform, to fit in, and sometimes even to belong. And slowing down reminds me of my grandparents because they seem to have followed daylight when lights went off, when the sun never sets though, but when there's a transition from night to day and day to night, particularly in the evening, you found we slowed down. We used candles, and then at a certain time, the candles were blown out. It was time to go to bed. Slowing down is evidence, climate change aside, in nature. We in the Cape now, I think it's the end of autumn. Sometimes it feels like summer, sometimes it feels like winter starting. But there's a movement we're going, and we can't rush that. We have to slow down. You cannot wait. You cannot call on summer because we have to go through winter. There's a slowing down. The animal kingdom has a sense of hibernation. Squirrels collect nuts and bury them. And there's this waiting, the slowing down, the being still. And I think that value of slowing down is what we need to bring into our spaces and not feel pressurized and that we are seen to be lazy if we're doing nothing. I think we become even more productive, more generative in the way that we are able to add value to the world. And so, yeah, within education spaces, I think in our program, we try in some way to inculcate this aspect of slowing down. And so far, I think it's working fairly well for us. Yeah, thanks.
Well, why don't we check that with Antoinette? Antoinette, maybe you can share with us what it felt like being a student in the diploma and maybe some practical examples of how you felt this this principle of slowing down being brought into the classroom, so to speak.
Thank you for your question, Vanessa. Wow, this is such an important thing for me because I have struggled with anxiety for a very long time, for many years of my life. And thanks to the diploma program, I have much improved. And one change that I was taught is the importance of meditation, very much like we just did with Sean. Previously, I used to ignore breathing techniques. I felt that, they were useless, they were stupid, but I actually started practicing them myself. And I could feel literally my own body calming down. And this is what I do now before I have to deliver an important presentation, or when I have to just do anything that's very important, or something that makes me nervous in life. Spending time in the outdoors is a very big one. I mentioned earlier that I really like to go to Lesotho someday soon because when I was there, I was away from technology. There's no cell reception in the community where my grandmother comes from. And there is some of the calmest places I've ever been to. And whenever I feel anxious, this is what I do now. I spend time in nature and I meditate and I do these breathing exercises. And I would never have taken these things seriously if they weren't practiced in the diploma program. And I remember specifically one trip that we went on with Sean as part of the program. And we went to a nature reserve that had no cell reception, and you couldn't hear cars or any industrial or mechanical products of humanity. All you could hear was the sound of nature. And it had been the calmest I had felt that entire week. All I could hear was the sound of birds and the sound of insects. And it reminded me that there's more out there than just your immediate problems, and that you need to remember that, especially when you're going through those very hard times. It can be so easy to only see the problems around you, but these types of practices are very important. And one last skill that I now practice, I knew about it before, but I'm intentional about it, is journaling and reflecting on your day and on your week. One reason for this is because it puts you in perspective of where you are, and it can even provide you solutions as you journal and give gratitude and give thanks to realize, wait a minute, there's a lot to be happy about. There's a lot to be thankful for. And this is one practice I also do regularly. Thank you.
Thank you so much for sharing that, Antoinette. And I think if we have any students with us in the audience, I think they can probably relate to this sense of anxiety, and probably a lot of us actually in this day and age, that the anxiety that seems to be simmering just below the surface for many of us, and how that can be stilled by connecting to nature and this idea of slowing down. And you didn't specifically mention this, but I know in our conversations in the past, we have also often referred to the need to slow down in this rush to our solutions. And the wonderful philosopher, writer, poet, Bayo Akomolafe often speaks about this, the need to slow down in urgent times. And especially in programs that are very much focused around social innovations, social entrepreneurship, which this program is, and change agency, finding solutions to very complex challenges. I think the idea of slowing down, which is so counterintuitive, is even more important, so that we can find solutions that emerge from something completely new and not repeat old patterns that we very easily can fall into. So thank you so much for sharing that. Ruenda, I don't know, you had a beautiful quote that I wondered if you wanted to share on this topic.
Oh, goodness. I can't remember who said it now, but it's around the fact that this work needs to be deep and slow and irreversible. And I think we only get to the irreversible part if we do it slowly, and we can only go deeply if we do it slow.
Thank you. Sorry, I think my internet connection is unstable. I missed most of that. Thank you so much. I would like to see if Jay is with us. I saw that you're in the room again, Jay. If you are you here?
Hello, Vanessa. Yes, I'm here.
We're so happy to have you. Jay, if I can put you on the spot. So a lot of what we've been doing and what we've been talking about now has been about slowing down, which really requires us to move into the body as well. And I think that was demonstrated by Sean in his meditation. And I'd like for you to maybe reflect on how do you actually move beyond the mind into the body, and what is important about incorporating the body into learning?
Thank you so much for that question, and apologies for all the technical difficulties that I've been having. But moving on to the question, to me, moving beyond the body into the mind involves recognizing the importance of physical engagement, firstly, which is the embodiment in the learning process. For example, physical movement, which is something that we do really often within the program. It helps us as students to be able to be creative, because once you're in one space and looking at just one specific wall, then some people find it very difficult to find or ignite their creativity. So by moving the body, it does stimulate a lot of creativity within a person, depending on what type of learner you are. And it also drives change makers into becoming people who are solution orientated, because you're able to interact with each and everything that's around you and making the best out of it. So by our facilitators being able to incorporate the mind, the body into learning, this has created a dynamic and engaging experience throughout the program, and that accommodates a very diverse learning style, and it also promotes a deeper understanding, which cultivates a holistic approach to the learning space. So yeah.
Wonderful. And you said that the diploma brings physical movement into the program. Would you mind sharing an example of how that is done?
So I remember we once had a session where we had to apply our design thinking skills, right? So we were given sort of like those sticky notes, and we were seated in a round table. So we were, I think in a group, I think we were about 5 in a group, if I'm not mistaken. And then on that piece of paper, you were asked a question, right? And then you had to move around that specific table. So whenever you get to a certain spot, you need to pin down your note, your sticky note, and with answering that question. So it didn't have to be a phrase, but just one word that comes to mind when you're asked that question. So after doing all of that, we were able to sort of like be or check with one another in terms of where we are in terms of our thinking. So instead of just sitting down and analyzing the question, you're challenged to think on the spot, to just also not think about something too much, but also to understand what other people are thinking. And in most cases, you find that our perspectives are different. Some are similar and some are even indifferent, but we always find a way of making everything work.
Great, thank you. Thanks for sharing that, Jay. And I also wanted to add into that the Elima that I know is done in the mornings, often also not necessarily with only the diploma students, but other students that are on site as well, where there is a movement and a reading, often a breathing exercise. Just the importance of remembering that we're not just walking heads, but actually attached to this thing that we call our bodies. And that often plays a very important role in getting into a space, calming us down, being able to focus, and learning with heart, head, and hands. And with that, I'd like to move on to the heart. So we speak about learning through head, heart, and hands. And Ruenda, what do you think the heart what role does the heart have in education? Why is it important to bring in the heart, which sometimes gets seen as more of not something that necessarily has to feature in education?
Sure. Yeah, I think the heart speaks to the African concept of Ubuntu. So we are who we are through others. And I have learned in my time in the diploma, having come from a traditional schooling system and from natural sciences, as a student myself, there was no heart there. And when I walk into a classroom, I'm becoming more and more aware of the fact that we are whole people. I'm very aware of my own emotions when I step into the space to teach, but I'm also in a space with 20 to 40 young people who all have emotions that they are bringing into the classroom. We're all in some way, shape, or form dealing with life at any given moment. And this idea that we simply switch that off and switch our brains on in order to engage with learning is ridiculous. It just doesn't work that way. And I think it's become part of my practice to try and feel what the energy of the room is and what is needed at that moment when we start. I love starting with some kind of a check-in, and whether that's as simple as sitting in a circle and every person just saying one word that describes how they're feeling. Sometimes we can do a quiet meditation as a check-in. Sometimes we just go for a walk outside together. And it's not just at the start of a session. Sometimes you come back after lunch, which is always the worst time to have to try and engage your brain. And I think I've learned that if we listen to our hearts and what is being held and playing out in the space, and we respond to that, it enriches the learning experience. You know, who we are and how we are as individuals, and then as a learning community, when we come together in an academic space, that must come before the content.
Yeah, absolutely. And I wonder if I could, seeing as Jay hasn't had a chance to talk much yet, Jay, if I could put you in the spot again and ask you specifically from a change agency perspective, what role the heart plays for you as a student and how you experience that aspect of this, the philosophy of this program while you were a student.
Here's to you putting me on the spot throughout the session, Vanessa. But thank you so much for that question. So the heart symbolizes our deepest emotions and connections, which is something that we all have. And this plays a very important role because it nurtures empathy and compassion. And that sort of like brings a sense of social responsibility, because it allows us to have a deeper connection with each other and be able to empathize with other people. So you don't necessarily have to be in that society or in that community for you to understand what they're going through. But because of the heart, you are able to connect and to also be able to find solutions at that time. So the emotional engagement between us as students, it has fueled a lot of passion for within us, and it has also created very strong and deep connections, because we are not only coming into this space to focus on our academics, but we also recognize that we are here for different reasons, and the heart has played a very important role, because we came in as just students who were strangers, but by the time we ended our first year, we became sisters and brothers, which was such a beautiful thing to see, because we all come from different backgrounds. However, because of the heart that has connected us through the conversations that we've had, through the different interactions, that has enabled us to connect without necessarily relating to anything, but also just being able to empathize. So the heart does really play an important role in creating connections, in nurturing connections, and in also establishing a form of bond with people, because you start as strangers and you leave as people who have a very, very good connection. So it's such a beautiful experience, because I never thought that I would come out of the program with so much, because we don't only talk about our professional careers or academics, but we are able to connect beyond that, because we do understand that apart from where we are, we're also human. We have lives, outside of these walls. So yeah.
Wonderful. I love that you brought in this aspect of community and building community amongst your peers. This road of change agency, solving these really challenging issues that we face when we talk about sustainability is really lonely work. And it often is also work where you feel like you're going against the majority or against the flow. And that can be really lonely. And it's so wonderful to hear that you have that community to be doing that together with. Amazing.
Yeah.
And I think something that links to this topic is this idea of joy. And a wonderful author by the name of Bell Hooks. And if you don't know who Bell Hooks is, then you really need to look her up. But she has a beautiful book where she talks about joy in learning and the importance of bringing joy into the classroom. And that's something else that I think is quite has in our conventional modern ways of educating has been discarded and doesn't often find a place. Learning has to be something that is very you're sitting in a classroom, you're concentrating, there's no room for this idea of bringing that sort of love and that joy and fun into the classroom. And I'd love for Ruenda and Antoinette to maybe reflect on that a little bit and share why you think it's important to bring joy into the classroom, and beyond just us feeling good, what does it do in the process of learning if we bring joy into the mix? Maybe I could ask Ruenda to start us off.
Thanks, Vanessa. So my answer is twofold. If I think about my own experiences with learning, I'm very fortunate in that at a young age, I went to Montessori school. So my experience with learning has always been positive and encouraging and filled with curiosity. And I was allowed to explore things that I was curious about. And I remember when I was 6 years old, I was just really into elephants, and my parents bought me a conservation book on the Knysna elephants, and it was never that, oh, you're only 6, you shouldn't be reading that. So my own experience with learning has been joyful and curious and playful. I mean, I'm very concerned about what I'm hearing about what we're doing in primary schools at the moment, where children are anxious and they have homework, and it's, the opposite of what I think we should be doing in terms of learning. And I think that's to your point earlier around the heaviness and the burden of this kind of work when we talk about sustainable development and preparing young people to become change agents. I mean, the world's a shambles. They're carrying a very heavy burden. We're all looking to them as the generation that's supposed to magically solve climate change and deal with global recessions. They didn't have a hand in creating the problem, but they need to fix it. And for us to motivate them and help them find solutions, we need joy to counterbalance that burden and the complexity of the problems we're trying to solve. And when you're in a relaxed and a joyful learning space, we see that creativity and collaboration automatically follow. I mean, there's some research coming out of Harvard. They call it the progress principle, where they've demonstrated this kind of positive cycle between joy and creativity. And the more creative you are, the more joy you experience. The more joy you experience, the more creative you become. So if we're talking about finding solutions and innovating for problems, unprecedented kind of problems, then obviously we need joy. And I think in the diploma, it takes many forms. Sometimes it's just the conversations the students have while they're planting vegetables and they're talking about their favorite types of food, or when they're playing drums and they get to beat out their frustrations in their own rhythms, or when we make jokes. I think at the moment, my measure of a successful teaching day is whether we laughed in the class. And I'm fortunate in that, you can see the kinds of students that we have in our learning spaces and in our classrooms. They bring the joy. You just need to allow it to exist in the classroom.
Yeah, wonderful. And this, this idea of, or when we're coming into a space in a scarcity mindset, or in a where we don't feel psychologically safe either, this joy can't emerge. And I love that connection you made to creativity. Because that's what we need right now, is lots and lots of creativity. And if we're not experiencing the joy, we can't get to those creative solutions. Antoinette, would you like to add anything to that?
Yes, I would like to. And I think that when you bring joy into the classroom, you are also more encouraged and you are present. When I decided to study the diploma in sustainable development back in 2021, I was working a regular 9 to 5. I was making very little money, but what really stressed me was the idea that I wasn't really doing anything impactful. I was just sitting in my little cubicle and doing as I was told, and that was that. And it wasn't clear what this was doing for young people. And so when the diploma program was introduced to me by my mom, I read all about it and I said, yes, this is exactly what I want to be doing, because I wanted to have social impact on people. And so when I brought joy into the classroom, or even in the outdoors, Rwanda talked about working in the garden, which we did quite often. I was open and receptive, and I was there presently, physically present and mentally present as well. I believe that we all have to be passionate about what we're studying or what we're doing, and make sure that we're giving back to communities. And so that is how we inspire others to also do this. And we also get inspired by those who do the same thing. I often find myself networking and connecting with people who are also passionate about social impact. And I think that this is what brings me joy, and this is why I love doing the work that I do, because it helps so many people and I'm glad to do it. So yeah.
Wonderful. Thank you so much for that, Antoinette. Really nice to hear also some practical examples of how you experienced that joy during the time at the Sustainability Institute. And I wonder if any of our audience members have thought about this. But I think, with what we have been talking about, and also what Sean led us through earlier, I think there's much of this that really leans into almost the spiritual. And I think, it comes up in the program. And I wonder, Sean, if you could share with us a little bit, much of what you teach, and also how you teach it kind of leans into that spiritual aspect, or at least can be interpreted as such. And what role do you think spirituality plays within this program, within education, and how would you handle it when it brings up tricky conversations and uncomfortable feelings?
Sure. I think the examples are clear. I mean, we've heard already what Anthony has shared, what Rwanda shared. There's the element of joy. Those are kind of outcomes, or I would say fruits of the spirit, And we focus primarily on the head, heart, and hands, and in what we do that's included in what we do within teaching and learning. And while my co-panelists were speaking, I was reminded that we actually are nature. We have this, we tend to assume that nature is out there. We go to nature. And nature, being in nature is profoundly a spiritual act. One cannot immerse themselves in the natural world without connecting to the spirits of the trees, of the birds, and the natural elements. And as Africans, our cultural background and those of students are deeply imbued in a sense of spirituality. Spirituality is that force that gives me stamina to do what needs doing, to hold space. And upon entering tertiary institutions, there seems to be this unspoken assumption that students arrive empty, needing to be filled with knowledge, and forgetting that they are actually spiritual beings arriving as we all are. And so there's almost this disconnection at times of trying to be filtered. It's almost to be like in a laboratory that you erase all of that of spirit and you come to have a knowledge dump and then you leave. And I think we do ourselves a disservice when we forget that the spirit is around us. We are spiritual beings first and foremost. And when issues arise, because some people may question that and say, I don't believe in that. And that's okay. That's what university discourses are for. We allow differences of opinion. And when that does arise, so in a class situation, someone may challenge that, and I welcome that. Because that's where learning, if we talk about teaching and learning being active and students being active citizens in how they engage with content, they need to question, they need to challenge. And so when that happens, the space is created for differences of opinions and respecting those differences of opinion. But for me, I cannot work without being connected to spirit. I'm not saying I do this consciously 24 hours a day, but it's who I am as an African man. It's how I enter into this space, and it's what I share and contribute to the joy that Rwanda and Ethernet were talking about, and the heart that Jay alluded to. Yeah.
Thank you, Sean.
That's clear.
Yeah, and I would love input from the audience if you do have questions around this, or what feelings this might be bringing up for you. I think it is an interesting topic, and we get asked that question quite a lot, is what role does or should spirituality play in education? And we felt it was an important aspect to bring into this conversation, because we are talking about education for wholeness, and how do we harness the transformative potential of whole person education, of which spirituality is definitely a part of that. And I want to maybe just stick with you, Sean, because you talked about nature, you referred to nature. We've spoken a lot about us as individuals in the education process or learning journey. This idea of heart, mind, body. We've spoken a little bit about community and the aspect of community and building community through learning. But also you mentioned nature, and I'd love to go there a little bit more. Could you speak a little bit more about, why this rekindling, this human nature connection is important, and why do you think this is the work of education rather than happening somewhere else? Why are we bringing this into education?
I hope I got your question right in terms of how I'm going to respond. But I think immediately there was a book written by Jack Forbes for Columbus and other cannibals, I think. And he spoke of this principle within the Native American terminology called wetiko. And that's basically a cancer of the spirit or of the person, that as you touch, you touch this spirit, you become contaminated. And on the other hand, I think of an activist, the late Professor Wangari Maathai, whose life was around nature and the reconnection to nature. And so having these two at either ends, I'm thinking of the current industrial financial system. Technology has created this disconnection or this fracture between humans and the natural world. Nature is seen as a place to plunder, a place to extract. We need the minerals, we need the resources. The way we even talk about nature, a natural resource, instead of it being a life source. And that's one of the ways, I challenge students to think about the language that we use, very colonial. And so we're thinking of rekindling this connection is really imperative for our survival as a species. How do we reconnect to nature? And so within our modules, we provide these opportunities for students to have this reconnection. And I think both Antoinette in particular has alluded to this. We've seen the video where students are outdoors in the woodland at the SI, immersing themselves, taking time to get to know a space. So this reconnection and this rekindling is really important. And in so doing, there's a moment they find of silence, of solace, and being able to go on a hike as part of this reconnection and rekindling to nature. It's this awareness or this awakening of the spirit. Stefan Harding, in his book, speaks of being Gaiad. I think in Pentecostal Christian churches, you talk about being born again. Within an African setting, it's this knowledge, this acknowledgement of knowing that the ancestors are all around us. And so this reawakening to this wonder. And that's what we try to do with the students in the modules, in some of our modules, is being able for them to have this awakening and connection to the natural world. A very simple, practical example. We have about 10 lectures in one of the modules, ecoliteracy. And in the first time they go and sit outside we paid 15 minutes, there's a lot of frustration and questioning around, what am I doing here? Why am I here? And by the end of the term, often for some of them, there's this discovery. We start in winter and we're moving, and by spring, they get into to see the space, and they start recognizing that there's a world that they were unaware of when they first started. And when we're talking about change agents, we're hoping that in developing this love and reconnection to the natural world, that they become advocates for nature and advocates for change. And in being social entrepreneurs, they remember that Mother Nature is the only place that we have, and we have no other planet to conserve. And I think that's the message we're trying to do in having this rekindling with nature.
So important. And that's, I think, what I observe to be very different in this program is that, many programs exist out there, which are wonderful programs that are just as important, very focused on building solutions, finding solutions to climate change, to food insecurity, to many of these complex challenges. But if you're not bringing in that nature component or that deep connection, that almost, like you said, that spiritual connection to nature, who will fight for nature eventually? And when we are designing solutions for these challenges, who's speaking on behalf of nature? And I'd love to ask Antoinette a question around different ways of knowing. So in the video, we speak about different ways of knowing. What does that mean to you? What is that? Why is that important to integrate into education, do you think?
Thank you for the question, Vanessa. I think this is such an important question. I think that when we think of knowledge, it is very academic, and it is very much focused on data and tried and true methods that have been done for centuries. And I think that there is other knowledge besides for that. And one type of knowledge that I repeatedly apply in my own life is intuitive knowledge, which is the ability to understand without proof or evidence. Intuitive knowledge is the kind of knowledge I use when I make personal decisions or when I interact with people in a social context. And here I use this ability to understand and predict people's needs without necessarily being told what it is they need. This is often also called nurturing, but I think it's more than that. It can also protect you in small ways. And I think that intuitive knowledge, it is very important to embrace and to be able to apply as well in your life. I think that both, academic knowledge as well as intuitive knowledge has the ability to make us empathetic beings and to remember to empathize with each other. I think that with industrialization and technology, we have gained so much power as humans. However, what we can lose is the ability to empathize with each other because we put so much technology between each other. And over time, we can fail to recognize each other as separate and feeling human beings because we're used to getting what we want out of technology. But for human beings, we're a lot more complex than that. And so I think that intuitive knowledge is specifically important when we interact with each other in a social context. Whereas, academic knowledge is very much, it doesn't really care about much else besides the facts. And so things like joy and things like empathy, spirituality doesn't really account for much when we're talking about academic knowledge. However, when we're looking at different types of knowledge, spiritual knowledge, intuitive knowledge, other forms of knowledge that may arise that you may think about as I'm speaking, all of these are very important in human to human interaction and human to nature interactions.
Wonderful. Thank you so much, Antoinette. When you were speaking, I was thinking of David Orr and his book, Earth and Mind. And he has this beautiful part in that book where he says, Mother Earth is not calling for more engineers and more accountants and more doctors, but actually calling for people who will care for Mother Earth. And I don't know, Rwenda, if you can think of that quote. You're much better at remembering these quotes, but otherwise I'll quickly look it up at the end. But it's a beautiful one. And Jay, I wonder if you had some practical examples for us in terms of the different ways of knowing and how you felt that was brought in or made room for in the program.
So on my end, I've seen our program incorporate a combination of cultural, emotional, experiential, and intuitive learning as well. For example, we had a module called Worldviews, and I think I didn't really understand what worldviews had to do about until I came across the module itself. So that module taught us about how do we deal with different worldviews. I mean, growing up, I've always been that person. If I have a conversation with you and I feel like your opinion is better than mine, then I'll cross over to your end and just agree to whatever it is that you're saying. But then having been exposed to a module about worldviews and working with students, not only from South Africa, but from the States as well, I think that gave me an overview of what worldviews entails and the different ways of learning as well. Because during that time, I got to understand that as much as we are all students, but because we come from different backgrounds and also from a different country, that also meant that our ways of learning was completely different. So I won't go into details, but I would say that this has helped me specifically to understand that people have their own opinions, and it's what you make out of those opinions. And obviously that doesn't mean that you shouldn't engage in conversations because you don't agree with that specific worldview, because through interactions and networks, this contributes to your growth and self-development as well. And that can only happen when you have these conversations and put yourself in situations where you are able to learn and grow from a conversation without being defensive about it, and also understand that we learn and understand things differently. But as change makers, for as long as we have one goal, how we get there doesn't really matter, for as long as we stay rooted in our values, and also keeping in mind that we are all working towards the same goal. So yeah, I would say we always have like this one goal as change makers, and we often spend a lot of time in wanting to be the right person, or wanting this specific person to use this way of doing things. But then it's also okay to approach it in a different way, and collaborate and partner, so that we can be able to tackle this one thing by using different ways. So that's my experience in terms of ways of learning, and that's also the experience that I've had working in groups, understanding the fact that we learn differently, and for as long as we accommodate each other, we can work together and collaborate and partner and be able to and be able to come up with solutions. So yeah.
Lovely. I think you bring such an important point to the table around finding ways of holding conversation in this the world of polarization that we find ourselves in, and actually being able to talk as humans on very difficult topics sometimes.
Yeah.
Yeah, thank you so much. Ruenda, I wonder, I know you often refer to yourself and your colleagues as facilitators rather than lecturers and educators. And I wonder if you could explain a little bit more, go into a bit more detail, why you do that and what for you the difference is. And I think we're going more into this, maybe the behind the scenes thinking of somebody who runs the program and really is guiding the philosophy and the approach of this program. Why do you call yourself a facilitator?
Thanks, Vanessa. I think I noticed one or two of my Stellenbosch University colleagues in the call as well, and Sim in particular, and I often have this conversation around breaking the rules and the little acts of rebellion that allow for us to push back a little bit on what we don't think is working, and something as simple as when we're in class with students, to change the dynamic and remove the apparent hierarchies, the imposed hierarchies that come with titles and designations. Because really, and I think Sean will also agree with me here, I mean, we don't have all the answers. Wish we did. Unfortunately, we don't. And we really are just privileged to be guides in a learning journey for a young person. The things we talk about in terms of sustainability and regenerative futures and innovation, that's far beyond our knowledge. So it is very much about co-creation with our students. And I mean, the past 7 years I've spent with the diploma has shaped me more than any formal part of my educational journey. And I think one of the big things, and I know you know this about me, but when I started teaching, I still make beautiful Excel sheets, don't get me wrong. There's a time and a place for Excel. But I used to plan my lectures out in advance, and I would assign every 15 minutes had a different purpose, and we were going to get there. And I've been blessed to have students that have challenged me in this from the very beginning, and that have claimed the space for themselves, because there is really no way to predict or control, nor do I think you should predict and control where a particular piece of content needs to go. Because when you think about it, it's so random, right? It's completely random. The people who are in the room, what's happening in the world at that point in time, where everyone is at emotionally and mentally. So you need to work with emergence. And I'm just there to facilitate the process. And I'm just lucky that learning happens along the way. I think it's difficult in a traditional higher education space. You know, titles and designations don't equate respect, and definitely don't mean learning is taking place just because someone who's standing in front of you has the title of professor. And it's not saying that students must call you by your first name. I prefer that students refer to me as Rwenda. But again, to Jay's point of worldviews, and Sean has also corrected me on this, that, you know, some students might not feel comfortable because culturally it's inappropriate for them to call me by my first name. So currently my first years are calling me Magogo. I don't know if they think I don't know that that means grandmother, and whether that's a reference to my gray hair, but I think, you know, I'm much more comfortable being Magogo or a facilitator or just a partner in a classroom than being the teacher.
It's such a different way of walking into a space, I think, and it leads to a very different way of engaging with students, I think. I'd like us to end off before we go into some Q&A. I'd like to ask, and specifically for Rwenda and Sean, but anyone who feels called to answer, Antoinette, Jay, please jump in. I'd love to know, what do you say to your critics, and what have some of those criticisms been? You know, I think anything where we're talking about doing something new, doing it differently to mainstream, will result in criticisms, will result in discomfort. And yeah, if you wouldn't mind sharing with us in the audience, what that has felt like and what some of that content has been.
Anyone else want to take a stab at the question? I suppose I get a lot of the critique, or not critique. I think, if I'm being honest, most people's response to our story, whenever we share these kinds of thoughts, it's like everyone intuitively says yes, like I get it. I think it is oftentimes more a question of, is it scalable? Or how do we replicate it in a different environment? So the one part is we're very fortunate, but I also think we're resourceful, and we've made use of the relationships and partnerships and all those things to create this program. We also know that things change and we have to constantly adapt. So the program won't look the same in 5 years' time. I think it's a bit of a problem if it does. So you can do this whether you have access to an eco-village or not. It is, to slow things down in a classroom is radical enough. To connect with on a human level with your students is radical. You don't need any pre-approved permission to do that. I think it is really a difficult question, because I hate that we talk about education in the terms of scalability and all the triple bottom line and all the other business aspects that come with it. You know, I wish we can make education just be about education again, and not run it as a business. I think I mean, I don't know that higher education in its current form is still really relevant. You know, so much of the world has changed, but the way we tackle it in higher education has not. And all of this stuff is man-made. The idea of having 50-minute periods and multiple subjects on one day, someone came up with that. Like, that's not a physical law. The idea of having semesters, or that a BSc is 3 years, like all of that was created at some point. And we haven't done a big system overhaul in a long time. We just keep doing it in the same way, which means in many ways, I think this was one of your very first comments, Vanessa, as we just keep perpetuating the same system, which is broken because it's delivering these kinds of problems in the world. So to my critics, you know, I think you've seen my students today, and not that Sean and I take credit for these incredibly mature and wise young people, but I think the fact that they are able to speak like this says that we can do education differently, and it's incredibly powerful when we do.
Very powerful. Thank you, Ruwenda. I think lots to chew on, lots to think about. I'd want, before we jump into, I think people can request to unmute if you do have a question. But before we go to that, I wonder if James, if there were any questions in the chat or comments in the chat that you'd want to read out to us before we go into a more interactive live Q&A.
So we had no specific questions, but we had some comments. Let me just comments were like, thanks for the insightful discussion, some important aspects of education to focus on. And then the other comment that we had was, I wish all programs could start with human before the discipline, and the other stuff we value more. But that's all we have.
Okay, wonderful. Thank you so much, James. Thank you for sharing that. Does anyone in the audience, so I think this wraps up our more formal part of the panel discussion. It's been very much just the 4 of us or 5 of us going back and forth. We'd really love to hear how it landed for you. Even if you don't have a question, please feel free to comment. How has education been for you, for example? What has been your experience in education? And is this very strange and weird, or is it something that you can relate to?
I think there was a question in the chat, Vanessa.
Okay, I'm going there now. Yes. So Melissa asked, why is this a diploma course and not a degree? Ruwenda, would you like to tackle that one?
Well, I think on a more philosophical point, I would also ask why we think that distinction matters in the first place. I am aware of our perception in the higher education space, and we do work within a system that has NQF levels and expects certain forms of progression throughout the system. So the simple answer to that, Melissa, is that we started when the program was formulated with this idea that we wanted it to be a lot more practical and less theoretical, which is normally how the Department of Higher Education and Training distinguishes between bachelor's degrees and diplomas. My students will know this, and I often say that I think we make them work a lot harder than you would if you're in a class of 300 and no one knows whether you're in class. And we do have a 4th year, so an advanced diploma program. So if you do the 4 years, it is NQF level 7, which means our students still have the opportunity to progress into postgraduate studies should they want. So both Antoinette and Jay are currently completing the advanced diploma. I just think it's also interesting to note that a lot of our students actually feel quite comfortable and content to go out into the world once they've done the 3 years and at a later stage come back to university, which if I were president, that would be law. I would force everyone, because that's what I didn't do. I was so scared after my undergrad. I didn't know what to do with my qualifications, so I just stuck around for another 12 years. I don't recommend that. I think you should go and play and be and experience in the world. And especially because we have such a strong focus on social entrepreneurship, we really do want our students to go and test their ideas in the world. We know unemployment is a huge problem in South Africa. I think what's also interesting is the high rates of unemployment for graduates in South Africa. And I think that's also part of the reason why I don't really feel it's, the distinction between diploma and bachelor's is not really important to me. It's a lot more focused on what my students end up doing after the program. I also see Melissa has another question, Vanessa, but I'm happy for someone else to respond.
Well, let me read out the question and see if who'd like to respond to it. But Melissa also asked, how do you work with storytelling in the modules, recognizing we need a new narrative to inspire regeneration? Ruenda, I have a feeling it might be you again.
That's fine. That's fine. I'm going to kick it to Sean because I know he'll have something to add here. But I think, thank you, Melissa. It's such an important question. Storytelling is powerful. And I think maybe the first part of it is when we slow down and when we check in with students and we kind of level the playing field a little bit, and there isn't such a sense of hierarchy. Vanessa spoke about creating psychological safety. I think when that environment is there, storytelling happens, because that's just what we do as humans. We live in stories. It is such an important part of who we are. And I think it's allowing and validating stories. Student stories matter. One of the very first things we do with students in their first week in the program is letting them draw out their story as a river and kind of mapping the road that led them to this particular moment as a river, and then sharing what that looked like. What were the waterfalls, what were the little dry spells in your story that brought you here. So I think by acknowledging that in the very beginning, we're saying, like, this is important and your story matters. I think we also try and play with it in our assessments. So we don't do exams in our program, which is a very deliberate decision. We try and do applied assessments. So our students do things like podcasts and videos and presentations online and in person. Yes, they write academic reports and essays, but that's not where they start. They start with the more accessible assessments like reflective journaling. And I think that also by looking at different formats of assessments, it allows the student who might be a better speaker to share more confidently, and then at times the one who's a little bit more quiet and reserved might feel a bit more comfortable expressing themselves in written language. So it's important to create a different opportunities for storytelling as well. Sean?
Yeah, I'm thinking of the metaphor of a tapestry, and each cohort through emergence weaves this tapestry, and we don't know what it's going to look like at the end of 3 years, but I think through storytelling they weave this tapestry, and at the end of their journey with us, I think the teacher's wow moment, the facilitator's wow moment is together with students observing this tapestry. And that moment of awe is priceless for anybody in the education space. And so storytelling is one way of getting us to create this tapestry. Yeah.
Beautiful. Thank you both for those lovely answers. It seems like that might be the end of the questions. And maybe just to summarize and to end us off, if anyone has any, Jay, Antoinette, Ruenda, and Sean, if you have any closing remarks, this is the time. If you feel like there was anything that you really wanted to still put into the mix.
Yeah, I think just my closing thought would be for us to remember who we are and who has supported us to become who we are. And a very through the old it's an African, it's Ubuntu, umuntu no muntu gabantu. We are who we are because of others. And as we recognize and give thanks for those who've brought us to where we are, our responsibility is to pass it on and pay it forward. And that's what I encourage the participants here, and particularly our students, that you have a responsibility to now pass it on to others who come behind you.
Thank you, Sean. So with that, I'd like to just end off and round us off. I think we had a really amazing conversation today. Thank you to all of you who showed up today. Thank you to Ruenda, Sean, Jay, and Antoinette for your inputs and sharing your experiences, also so honestly and vulnerably. And also to James for keeping an eye out on the chat for us. And then to the Rise Africa Festival for allowing us this platform to share what we're all so passionate about. We love participating in this festival. And yeah, I think, you know, just this idea of education as a vehicle for change is so powerful, and something that we don't often think about in the way that we're encouraging you to think about it. Not just the what, as Ruenda said, but the how. How you educate is incredibly powerful, especially when it is about social innovation, creativity, problem solving, and all those kinds of things. So I found the quote that I referred to from David Orr in his book Earth and Mind, and I thought I would read that as the closing comment. And then I'll hand over to you, Tashi. I don't know if there was anything else that you wanted to say to the audience from Rise Africa's perspective. But yes, the comment. Okay, great. So the quote by David Orr is, "The plain fact is that the planet does not need more successful people, but it does desperately need more peacemakers, healers, restorers, storytellers, and lovers of every kind. It needs people who live well in their places. It needs people of moral courage, willing to join the fight to make the world habitable and humane. And these qualities have little to do with success as we have defined it." Thank you so much.
Thank you, Vanessa. I also want to thank you for hosting such a wonderful session and holding it with such gentleness, but also asking the important questions. I think sometimes it's easy to generalize about the education we want, but you really grounded it in such practical ways. And just for those of you who don't know, I'm also an alumni of the program, so there is some collusion happening in the background. So thank you so much. And I would just like to point you to the chat where there's a link you can follow to give us feedback on the session. I'm sure the session hosts will appreciate that as well. And then please click the link to the program and look at any other sessions that might tickle your fancy. There's a variety of sessions still happening tomorrow, and we'd love for you to join us. And then thank you to our interpreters for working so hard to make sure that we are accessible to all our French-speaking participants.